I think it's loud enough. Yeah. I've already said for those who came in late, I've already been compared to Julius Caesar, which is okay to a point. Joe Humphrey has suggested this looks like Billy Lotus. Yeah, maybe. A little more gray, but anyway. Okay, I got to fly here. We're going to cover the Punic Wars, which is this is Rome on the boil. This is Rome where it's just hitting its stride and extending out. Look, it's one thing for Rome to campaign in Italy, which would be kind of the backyard, and that's kind of its neck of the woods in some respects. Although, talk about all of Italy, that's a long state. I mean, talk about 500 miles long. In the ancient world, that's a long stretch. But anyway, of course, every time they conquer somebody, that puts them in contact with somebody else. That's the problem with engaging in empire expansion, just territory expansion. Every time, it's like the ripples in the pot. Every time you've got a new extension of power, you've got a new enemy, you've got a new neighbor, and they don't particularly. Well, we're reaching a point where Rome actually has ascended so much and is so powerful. You've got states that are going to beg to join. Please, please, please include us. Which of course would preclude being trounced by their army, so that might make some sense. But it's also got open borders and trade and things like that. What you're going to see in the next section on expansion, I want to kind of fly through this to get to the Carthaginian Wars because they are very involved, and we're just not going to have time to do them real justice. But anyway, look. By the time we get to about 265, Rome is pretty much in control of the Italian peninsula. It's got its military figured out. It's made some changes in terms of military. Do you want to talk about any of that stuff? Changes in Roman military?
Yeah, go ahead.
You want to wait on that till Wednesday? Or do you want to? Okay. At any point, you want to stick your hand up and say, "You know what you're talking about." Let me get up there. Then we can do that. Okay. So we got about 3rd century, early 3rd century. Remember, we're counting backwards here because we're all BC. So we go from 265 to 264 and all that kind of thing. But anyway, they're in control of the Italian peninsula. They've defeated the Etruscans, they booted them out, they've conquered the Greeks, which mostly just means they've pressured them to become trade allies and things like that and give us some of their colonies, those kinds of things. As they do that, obviously, that's going to put them in, again, proximity to somebody else. And the state that they come up against outside of Italy first is going to be the Carthaginians. You've got the Roman Peninsula here, the boot-shaped piece of property. Off the toe of the boot is this triangular shape. Some people call it a deflated football. I don't know. under inflated football. Is the island of Sicily. Now, let me get to a different map here, I think. Get the lights out. No, it's not going to show. No, it's not going to show. Okay. We'll stick with this one. What this isn't going to show you is that Sicily was actually cut in half. The Greeks that had been all over the southern part, kind of the toe to the heel of the boot, they had colonies here. They also had colonies on the island of Sicily on the eastern side. All right. On the western half of Sicily, that's where the Carthaginians had trade colonies. And of course, Carthage is functioning here out in northern Africa. So once they move here, then they've gained control over the Greeks. It means they've gained control over the Greek colonies on Sicily, which puts them right next to Carthage. And Carthage is going to basically look at Rome and say, okay, we're going to deal with this. Because now we've got this serious trade military rival on our back step. Now, when we talk about Carthage here, we'll go ahead and flip over to the Punic Wars and begin. We talk about Carthage here. Carthage is not a chump. Carthage is a powerful state. It is a state based almost completely on two things, and they interconnect: trade and a navy to protect that trade. You cannot function with seaborne trade effectively unless you have a navy to back it up, to protect it. Okay, and they are great sailors, fantastic, big navy, big ships. Ships like that, which may look small to you, I don't know. This one seems undersized to me. I think it's kind of deceptive in terms of the size. But ships like this, triremes, this is called a quinquireme, You've got 3 rows of oars, hundreds of guys at the oar, a quinquereme. The old Greek trireme was 3 layers of rowers, 3 guys, each one on an oar. By the time you get here to Carthage, the Carthaginian Wars, they have quinqueremes, 5 instead of 3. It's still 3 rows of oars, but you have on the top 2 layers of oars, 2 guys rowing instead of 1. So you got 5 guys rowing instead of 3, right? Which means speed, maneuverability, power. It's not about engaging in anything really here in terms of, there's not artillery as such, but what they're going to try to do mostly is do what? Ram each other. Yeah, you got these big rams on the front end of them. These extend out a lot further than what you see here in the picture. They ram up against a ship, just coming to a broadside, or just, and then it flounders, or it just is non-maneuverable. If you're really lucky, you can shear off oars, and then you're dead. Then they're dead in the water. You got one side that has oars and the other side doesn't. Okay, it's a lot of that, which doesn't work. But anyway, look. In terms of details here on Carthage, fantastic trading colonies. They're all over the Mediterranean, especially the western half of the Mediterranean. They're a formidable foe. Rome and Carthage, I think, are pretty equally matched here in these conflicts, especially the first 2 Punic Wars. The problem is going to be, though, oh, and by the way, 2 very different societies in terms of Rome is all about the landed aristocracy, and the businessman is kind of, oh, you engage in business. It's so sordid. But Carthage is a place that does exactly that. It's all about trade, business, merchandising, shipping. In fact, you'll see when we talk about their Senate, it's actually 50 merchants to make up their Senate. It's not about the landed aristocracy in terms of patrician class. So 2 very different concepts of power and where power derives from. In terms of their religion, again, these Carthaginians are the descendants of the Phoenicians. So these are folks back over to where some of us are familiar from our Sunday school stories and stuff, which doesn't make this map, but anyway, it's back over here. The things you read about in terms of the Old Testament, and Baal worship and all that, these folks are doing that too. Child sacrificing infants, a lot of it. There's a lot of it. The idea that parents would take their infant child to a priest, be placed on an altar, the topeth, stone altar, and have that priest then slash that child's throat is just unimaginable to us. But they did that by the thousands. It's pretty rough stuff. Again, in the ancient world, the values run differently. Very differently. I think we're at a point in our history where we value children maybe more than any other age group. We all don't get the respect that we should. But anyway, enough editorializing. That's not the way it works here. They see this as a great honor to sacrifice your child this way. So it is a society that runs, again, very different in that respect. And there's not going to be human sacrifice with the generally speaking. Okay, First Punic War, again, they're both on the island of Sicily. You can't abide by that. This island isn't big enough for the 2 of us kind of thing. And so we get in 264, the beginning of the First Punic War. It's called Punic, the Latin term, the Roman name for the Phoenicians is the Punicide. So that's where the term Punic Wars comes from. It's kind of an awkward conflict for a while, though, because Rome has ascended to power by what? By its army. By its military, not a navy. In fact, Rome, when this war begins, doesn't have a navy. So, you talk about coming to, bringing a knife to a gunfight. Well, one guy, they're the knife guys, and these guys are the gun guys. Well, with Rome, they're the soldier, they're the land fighters, and Carthage is the naval fighters. Well, that doesn't match up very well. And, of course, what Rome figures out pretty quickly is we got to get ourselves a navy. And they had virtually none. They never had a reason for a navy. All their fighting has been on the Italian peninsula. So they have to create a navy out of whole cloth pretty quickly, too. And I think they get lucky, and there's different versions of this story, by the way. But there's a story told that the Romans, early in the war, are going to get lucky in terms of a quinquereme, Carthaginian, actually maybe Greek, will run aground. and they'll get a hold of one of these things. And this would be like a fighter plane going down and the enemy getting a hold of it, figuring out how's the radar work, and all these kinds of things, how the missiles established, those kinds of things. And so they get a hold of a quick Kareem and figure out, we can do this. And then they'll throw together a navy. They'll throw together a navy of 330 ships. Almost like that. I mean, it's fast stuff. And that's going to pit them opposite one another. They put that navy together by 256. And it's a humdinger, because what these guys do, because they don't want to, Rome doesn't want to abandon its land forces. That's where it's good. So what they're going to do is they're going to add an element to a quid Kareem. It's this device right here called corvus. And a corvus, you can imagine how this works. It's a bridge, basically, so that when this quid Kareem would come up to an enemy ship, they would swing this thing around, right? So that wherever the enemy ship is, they're going to swing that bridge around, then drop it. Okay? So that on the end, there's this spike. And when that corvus falls, it will spike into the deck of the enemy ship. Now you've locked those ships together. And then they can take 70, 100, 120 Marines, go across that little bridge, and then they can just cut those guys to ribbons. It's a very effective way to change the... Look, it means we're going to have a Navy, but we're also going to use our Army guys. It's not just about Navy. And by the way, on these quid Kareems, we're talking about hundreds of rowers. We're talking about, again, 100 or so soldiers, Army guys. It's a pretty big deal. If you talk about these 330 quid Kareems the Romans are running, which again ran about 120 feet in length, about 15 feet wide, about 10 feet from waterline to deck. So they're formidable pieces of equipment. But you talk about 330 of those things, we're talking about several 100,000 people. We're talking about 100,000 rowers, horsemen. And you throw all these soldiers on top of that, that's a pretty big deal. By the way, that first Navy in 256 of 330 ships, most of those ships will be destroyed within 1 year, mostly by a series of storms, not battles. Sometimes somebody other than them are actually in charge, but now they're rebuilding. Look, what happens in the First Punic War is Rome throws everything it has with the kitchen sink, because Rome is at a point here where it's making decisions about how far do we want to go. How big do we want Rome to be? Look, when they control all the Italian peninsula, you're controlling 50,000 square miles of property. By the time the Punic Wars are over, you're going to almost triple that. How far do we want to go? Now, to beat the Carthaginians, they have to pour everything into this. They will spend a tremendous amount of blood and treasure on this project. In the First Punic War alone, they will run through 250,000 men. Now, you talk about gravitas, Phidias, religio, pietas. These are people who are taking themselves pretty seriously. And these are young men willing to go into the fight. You lose 250,000 men, you lose at least 500 ships, and these are expensive projects. This is not chump change. This is pouring a lot of blood and treasure into these battles, into these fights. So it's really big, big stuff. The Romans will win the First Punic War. They will then extract a tremendous toll on the Carthaginians. You can see on your text. It's always hard to translate these kinds of things, but war damages in terms of millions and millions and millions of dollars, again, it's hard to equate these things. But also when they emerge from this first war, they will gain territory. This is Rome before the war, and actually this is a little, they're not quite in the Po yet, but most all the Italian peninsula, they will emerge from the First Punic War defeating Sicily, they will gain Sardinia, they will gain Corsica. So all this green here becomes controlled by Rome. This is where Rome is no longer just an Italian state or a Latin state. Now it's becoming a Mediterranean state. And how far do you want to go? Because look, once you get into this groove of, and then the advantages that come from it, this groove of conquering other people and stealing their lunch money, if it works once, why can't it work twice? or 3 times. If it works here, why not here? Why not here? Why not here? Because Carthage emerges from the war intact. I mean, Carthaginians are not destroyed. They finally sue for peace. They will get it. There will be the annexation of that territory, but Carthage still exists. And Rome, I think, is happy for the time being. Now look, by the time that war is over, it's dragged on for more than 20 years. Now this isn't constant fighting. We're talking about 264 to 241. That's not fighting every day of the week by any stretch, but still, for a war to go on for 23 years, sometimes these ancient conflicts just seem to last forever. Part of that's about logistics, and part of that's about not fighting in the other seasons and all kinds of stuff. It's just complicated to move folks around. You know, to move an army in the ancient world, that's complicated, long strategy stuff. You better make sure that when you move that army from point A to point B, that point B is where you really want to be. You know. So again, it's getting pretty heady stuff. But again, the fact that the Carthaginians are still around means that they're just, in some respects, waiting for another day. You will also see 222 BC, a Roman army defeated by the Gauls. That we're talking about Rome. That was the last time that we're going to see Rome sacked in quite a while. I mean, that's just not going to happen again till we get to the latter days of the empire. Now, the First Punic War is over, but you're going to have some of these Carthaginian generals who say, well, now hang on. You may have lost the war, but I never got defeated. I never lost a battle. And some of these guys are just going to sit by and just let things go. What we'll have here, what you'll see here are some names that all start with H. You will see Hamilcar. The one we know, of course, is Hannibal. His father is going to be a fantastic general in his day, Hamilcar Barca. He's going to have a good general serving under him. One especially that's his real favorite, I'm going to mean that in some specific ways in just a second, is a guy named Hamilcar, or rather Hasdrubal. So we've got Hamilcar Barca, the father of Hannibal. We've got another general, we've got Hamilcar Barca, and then another general named Hasdrubal, all right? We weren't just hand in glove. Now, I'm going to tell you something that I could probably skip, but I won't. Just because it's such an odd thing, and I don't know, just indicative of something, I don't know what it means, but anyway, I'll let you figure out the context for it. In the strange, wacky, weird, immoral world of the ancients, what we have here, and this is sometimes the case, you know, we all know about Nero and some stuff. What we have here sometimes are just strange situations. Let me tell you what is strange here. Hamilcar Barca, father of Hannibal, one of his head generals is going to be Hasdrubal. They are actually going to be homosexual lovers with each other. Now that's not usually what we think about generals who serve side by side. Not usually. It happened with Alexander too, but anyway. On a normal, look, the context for this is most days of the week nobody would care. The fact that these two generals are lovers wouldn't generally make the papers. But it seems from the sources, and it's tricky to read the sources because sometimes you can read a Roman source describing the Carthaginians and they don't have to be friendly toward the Carthaginians, so you have to weigh this up. But it appears that their relationship was so intense that it was becoming scandalous. That Hamilcar Barca is so nuts about Hasdrubal, he just can't keep his hands off of it. And this becomes so obvious that even Carthaginian authorities will pass a law that require these two men to never be in physical contact with each other. Okay, you've taken it too far, I think, when people are passing it. Okay. I don't know if I have to tell you that story, but I did. Let me tell you how, because that becomes a little problematic, doesn't it? I mean, you got a general serving under another general. Look, Hamilcar Barca isn't going to take no for an answer. He will come up with a strategy to deal with the problem. Here's his answer. I'm going to marry off one of my daughters to Hasdrubal. That way, he will be my son-in-law, and there's no way the law can keep us apart. Okay, if this has reached a point where it sounds weird to you, put your hand up. Yeah. Yeah, please, keep them up. This is just sometimes where we land with this kind of talk. It's just strange, odd, weird, immoral, crazy. Why? You know, why would you marry your daughter off to this guy? You know, anyway. So anyway, look, Hamilcar Barca is a guy who was not defeated. He reminds his leaders about this. He says, look, I don't intend to just sit around on my hands here. If the Romans aren't happy with us in their direct backyard, then let's go someplace else. And what you're going to see Hamilcar Barca do, basically, is go here, towards Spain. And he's going to carry out campaigns, very successful campaigns, where he will defeat these folks in Spain, these different tribal groups in Spain. He will establish city-states along the way. He'll name one of these after himself, which is not on the map there, but Marcino is named for him. That's what today? Barcelona today. Yeah, some of this stuff comes down to us directly. He's going to be campaigning very successfully there until 228, and then he gets himself killed. So he's out. Once he's out, then the next general to take his place will be Hasdrubal. Now, Hannibal is coming up, and Hannibal's young still. When the First Punic War begins, he's not even around. I don't think Hannibal's born until about the last 6-7 years of the First Punic War, so he's a kid. But he will be on campaigns with his father. His father takes him on campaigns when he's a little kid. We're talking about 7, 8, 9 years old. He's out with the army. This is Hannibal, which is going to be a great one for us. His dad's gone. In comes Hasdrubal as the main leader. He will continue these campaigns. The Romans are going to start paying attention to them because they see them as trade rivals in the region. Eventually, the Romans will extract an agreement from the Carthaginians not to campaign south of the Ebro River, and they would stay away from Saguntum. We want you to stay out of Saguntum. For a while they do, but Hasdrubal says, forget it, I'm going to go for it anyway, and does. And once that happens, the Romans are going to, that's where at that point the Romans are saying, okay, what do they think they're doing? Didn't we defeat these guys already? Didn't they say they weren't going to go, and now what are they asking for, trouble? And of course we're going to get trouble. Hasdrubal will also be killed. In his case, it's not on the battlefield. He actually gets assassinated. He gets assassinated by a guy who was the servant of a guy that Hasdrubal had crucified. I say that because I want you to hear the word crucifixion in the 3rd century BC. We're hundreds of years before the lifetime of Jesus Christ. Crucifixion is not new. It's been around for a long time. It was used for hundreds of years prior to the time of Jesus. They've got it down to real science by the time Jesus was crucified. But this is not a new way to kill people. It's not an exclusively Roman way to kill people either. This is the Carthaginians do it, the Greeks did it, Alexander the Great did it. So anyway, out goes Hasdrubal. Now by that time, Hannibal is coming of age. He's still young, fairly young. He's late teens, early 20s, somewhere in there. But raised on the military and knows everything there is to know about the Carthaginian army. Now, he comes into a position of power. He will then begin to campaign. By that time, the Romans are saying, all right, if another war is what you want, another war is what you'll get. Now, Hannibal is not the kind of guy who's going to sit around and wait for the Romans to show up. He's going to be the kind of guy who says, we might as well take this war to them. Look, if we defeat the Romans, we want to control Rome, don't we? All right, then let's go there. And you get this tremendous campaign that begins with 90,000 men in his army, and Hannibal marching from Spain to Rome, literally to Rome. The Romans were real surprised by this. They thought they'd come by sea, which made sense, really. But he engages in this tremendous march, which is a bloody campaign. It's a hard campaign, takes about a year or so. You've got to go through the Alps. It's cold. He takes elephants. Almost all of them die. These are African elephants in the snow, for Pete's sake. It's who's not thinking ahead. And as he looks, it's not just a march. He's got to slog his way across. Every time he turns around, he's engaging some tribal group up in the mountain somewhere. By the time he emerges from that campaign and gets into northern Italy up to the Po, he's lost 2 out of 3 of his men. he's down to 30,000 men. Now he's going to pick up some here and there, some Celts and some folks, 15,000 or so. So he's going to get augmented, but he winds up, this was probably a mistake. I mean, why do that? Why campaign across this harsh environment, fighting your way to, I mean, it just doesn't, some of it doesn't make any sense, but anyway. He's there, then he's going to engage for year after year after year. Look, once he gets there, he's going to engage them pretty quick. He'll engage the Romans in 218. He leaves in 219 from Spain. He's in northern Italy in 218. He'll engage the Romans pretty quickly in a battle where he's completely outnumbered and defeats them. And then the Romans start wondering, oh, wait a minute, these guys are dead serious. Look, what Hannibal's going to do is absolutely fantastic, because he will be campaigning on Italian soil for about 15 years and engages in some of the most dramatic battles in the ancient world. You want to talk about Cannae at all?
Go ahead.
All right. In front of all these witnesses, I offered to turn the mic over to you. But anyway, you going to talk about it Wednesday?
Go ahead and go into that, then I can talk for just.
You're going to see what I don't say about Cannae? Okay.
About why that works.
Yeah, he's got a thing here. All right, here we go. Look, the big, and there's multiple battles being fought here, but the big battle we always talk about is the Battle of Cannae. Battle of Cannae is, what, 10 miles outside of Rome? Not very far. Here to the highway, and then double that. I mean, we're just talking about down the street from Rome. If this doesn't go well, Rome's in real pickle. It doesn't go well. Look, the problem with Cannae and interpreting Cannae is you get different numbers. That's the problem with these ancient sources. What I have here in the text is that the Romans will end this battle of Cannae. Look, this is a pincher movement mostly. They get them caught in between, basically. The text here will tell you 30,000 Romans get killed in this battle. 30,000 men get killed in one battle. But there's no American battle that we've ever seen those numbers. You can look at Gettysburg, which is 3 days of fighting. It's 50,000 casualties, but that's dead, wounded, captured, missing. This is 30,000 men dead. That's a minimum, by the way. 30,000 of these guys, think about the blood and treasure involved in these guys, all the logistics for these guys. I mean, think about the amount of loss here. And again, that's a low number. That's the safe, conservative number. There are some sources that will put the Roman numbers killed at Cannae at 70,000 men, maybe even 90,000 men. That's probably high. But look, even if you 50% increase it from 30 to 45 in one day. Again, this is blood and treasure. How much are you willing to lose here? How much are you willing to sacrifice? Now look, that's not just about Romans, by the way. Remember, Romans have allies by this time. They've got plenty of guys that aren't Romans themselves. They may be Roman citizens, but they're not Romans in terms of blood. Does that make sense? The Romans are really good here about extending out citizenship, not to everybody, but they're opening up the doors. So here's a loyalty to the state because citizenship has been granted. But Cannae is just a bloodbath as far as the Romans are concerned. Again, they may have lost twice the number you see here on the page. Two, by the way, not these things matter, but it's just important to know. This is a tight battle, too. The field where these men are gathered is about a 5 square mile field. So the distance from here to the highway, that kind of space, and you're losing a minimum of 30,000 men. So just think about the concentration of guys here. We're talking about men who are moving. Are you going to deal with that? Maniples and cohorts and legions and all that kind of stuff? Okay, so I don't need to worry about it. They're moving in blocks of men. The old Greek way of fighting was the phalanx structure. We're all familiar with that, where you take, depends on what you're talking about, you take 12 guys across, 12 guys deep, so you've got 12 rows of 12 guys, 144 in a block. All right? Then you just position them on the battlefield next to each other in multiple rows, however many deep you got guys. And they would carry 20-foot long, 21 foot long spears that they would stick out, you know, just as a hedgehog formation, basically. And it's very maneuverable in the battlefield because you don't have just lines of guys, you've got blocks of guys. And if you got lines of men, it's more complicated in multiple lines of men to say, okay, let's all turn to the right. Okay, if your line, and you want to turn your line to the right, that's very complicated to do. But if you want a phalanx of guys, or what becomes the cohort later, and then the legion, if you want that group to turn to the right, you do this. That make sense? And then what was your right flank becomes your front. It's very maneuverable in the battlefield. And they've adopted the phalanx, and they've adapted the phalanx so that instead of the old structure on the field, think about a checkerboard where all of the squares are the same color. And every block is going to have a phalanx on it. Okay? What the Romans do is go back to the checkerboard so that they are only putting a phalanx on the red squares, or only on the black squares. In other words, in a checkerboard pattern with space in between. The point of that is it is more maneuverable, but here's the key. It relies much more on the individual soldier in that structure than it does the group. And that's where these qualities of pietas, gravitas, religio, that's where those become important. It's about what I do on the battlefield as an individual, and how I show myself in the battlefield. But Cannae is just absolute loss. Now, again, it gets close but no cigar. What will happen ultimately is that he will continue to campaign against the city of Rome. Sometimes gets as close as a mile from the city. But look, this is all relative, because at the end of the day, you can get outside. It doesn't matter if you're standing right under the walls of Rome. This is a walled city, as all important cities in the ancient world were. And getting past the walls is the problem. So you can get right there and do all this you want to, but you're not going to get in. So that becomes the ultimate frustration for Hannibal. He can't get in the city. The longer he stays, the more frustrated he gets. Eventually he'll reach a point where he'll campaign up in the summertime. He'll go back down here to the Boot Heel, down to Brundusium, and he'll just camp there for the rest of the year until he goes and tries it again, but he just can't get in. Now look, he's going to face good Roman generals and bad Roman generals, and there's one Roman general especially we always talk about facing Hannibal outside Rome, and that's Fabius, right? You know the term for what that becomes? Fabius. Fabius is a guy who will not try to meet the Carthaginians straight on. It's a lot of hit and run. You're not guerrilla, but hit and run stuff. He hits and does a lot of feinting, not meaning passing out, but meaning hit and run, hit and go, never straight on. And he becomes known as Fabius the Delayer, which is what George Washington will be called in the American Revolution. It's Fabian, Fabius, because he won't hit the British straight on. Hit and he'll go. He'll hit the tail end of it and take off, that kind of stuff. Well, yeah, that way you hold your army together for another day. That's what you do. And that's how he functions too. But look, the Romans can't get past him, and he can't get past them. And then we reach a point where we get a couple of Roman generals who are going to make all the difference. This is where these guys come in, called the Scipios. We get Scipio the Elder and Scipio the Younger. This is going to mark the end of the Punic War. Very quickly, what's going to happen is you have Scipio the Elder, who will face Hannibal several times on the battlefield. In one of these battles, actually, he gets wounded, and his son, Scipio the Younger, has to rescue him from the field. And he's lucky he got out alive. Scipio the Younger is about 19. So anyway, here's another father-son pair, where the son is being raised in the military. And what's going to happen ultimately here is we're going to have the Scipios try to pull Hannibal away from Rome. First thing they do is they go off to Spain, and they campaign in Spain. Again, they're trying to pull Hannibal out of Italy to follow him to Spain. He doesn't do it. The next thing, and of course they have some success there, and Scipio is noted, and he gets lauded and praised, and he comes back to Rome, and he is made a consul at the age of 32. He's actually too young to hold that position. Let's stop right there real fast. That's important. Because here's a successful field Roman commander who comes back to Rome and brags about what he's done and lauded and praised for what he's done, and everybody thinks he's the best thing since sliced bread. What a fantastic guy. And then he wants to be a consul. Oh, you're not old enough, but you know what? Don't worry about it. Now look. That's a little chink in the wall. When you start ignoring the law and letting this happen anyway, rewarding a Roman general anyway, despite what the law says, okay, you're just asking for trouble. Once you start doing that, because once Rome starts, it won't stop. Because the next general wants that and more. You have all the laws on the books you want, but reach a point where the law doesn't matter. That's a big deal. You have all the laws and you don't pay attention to them, you don't abide by them, you don't enforce them, they don't exist. Then it becomes about those generals and what those generals want. Okay, real fast here. Again, campaigns off in Spain. Those don't draw Hannibal out. Scipio comes back to Rome. Scipio the younger by this time. He decides, okay, the only way I'm going to get this guy off our backs here is to go down to Carthage and invade toward Carthage. So he heads down to Carthage. At that point, the Carthaginians will appeal to Hannibal. You're not going to land in Rome, it seems like anyway. Why don't you come back here and help us before we lose Carthage? So he does. Then we're going to see a big battle not far outside of Carthage, called the Battle of Zama. Zama. How do you pronounce it? Zama? I say Zama, sorry. Today it's Zama. Wednesday when he's up here, it will be Zama. Okay? Just understand it's the same battle. Right? Here, outside of Carthage, not close, but anyway, down on their neck of the woods, big ranging battle. You're going to have Hannibal with elephants there, which will turn out to be a problem. They will be frightened by Roman trumpets. They will look. It's great if you can direct your elephants the direction you want them to go. If you can't, then you've got a tank with nobody inside. It's just going where it's going to go. That's what happens here. They lose track, they lose control of their elephants. Not that you really can control them anyway. And they go plowing through Carthaginian lines. And once you get your interior lines broken up in these battles, you're cooked. Because the whole strategy is predicated on structure and discipline. And once those lines are destroyed, then you're messed up. So anyway, Zama will be a big win here for the Romans. That will conclude the Second Carthaginian War. Look, for a time this is okay, but as Rome continues to ascend in power, it's going to decide after a while, you know what, why is Carthage still down there? Who let Carthage off the hook again? And so we go into a third Carthaginian War in the 140s. It doesn't last very long at all. One, because Carthage had never recovered from the Second Carthaginian War. And the only reason that war takes place is because, and this is different, is because Rome wants to destroy Carthage. Because it can. Carthage is not the power it was. Carthage wasn't the old Carthage. Carthage is a hollow shell. It's a broken reed. But you know what? We're Rome. And if we don't want Carthage to exist, then it doesn't. There's no compelling reason for the Third Punic War other than Rome just wants to stick it to Carthage. That's all. Because Rome can. And that's the Rome we've reached here, where Rome is just deciding still, what else do we want? Who else do we want to control? What are the ends of Roman power? Why are we even talking about that? We just need to decide where we're going next. Carthage just gets... I got to stop there. But this is getting to be a different Rome. This is not Rome just protecting itself. This is not just Rome throwing off somebody else who's going to control. This is Rome saying, we're going to dominate this planet.
Are you going to get into the economics of this? Immediately, Rome starts taxing all of these conquered individuals?
Yeah, we've got to talk about some of that because it is about, because I think we all kind of get Roman Empire controls in a way different from a lot of other empires in the ancient world, other than Persians. That is, keep your religion, keep your local leaders. You know, just think about the world of Jesus. I mean, Herod's on the throne. The Romans are in control, but there's local rule there. They take care of business. They have their own tax collectors. You just have to pay us tribute. Keep your nose clean. Don't do anything stupid. but you can run your economy, you can have your local rulers, you can have all the crazy religions you want to have, Judaism, what a strange religion, you know. We don't care about that. Just keep paying us money, keep it going.
You know, I was just thinking about how much you're talking about with these ships and everything.
Oh, yeah.
What it took to
Oh, yeah.
create
Yeah.
this
Yeah,
dynasty.
yeah, we'll get into more of that first thing tomorrow, because we'll be at the point where Julius Caesar's doing his thing, and when he conquers Egypt, oh, for Pete's sake, you're bringing in, it's a breadbasket of the Western world, you've got all the grain that you could possibly need, and you bring the Egyptian treasury to Rome, and you'll see interest rates drop from an average of 12% annually to 4%. Think about that. Think what that would mean. What's your house loan on? 4 or 5%? What if it was 1? Does that matter? You bet it matters. That's just one example. Okay, we got to stop. Thank you. We'll get it tomorrow.